what needs to be managed and manage it accordingly and as effectively as possible.
Makes sense. What can someone do in order to build their own skill set to become sort of more appealing to an organization or a bit more valuable to their organization?
Exactly. I think it's in the minds of many employees. I think the days of being one employee with one employer and that long-term relationship are gone for a multitude of reasons, employee drivers and organizational change. So I think we need to constantly be in a PD moment. We need to constantly be in a professional development framework where we're always reaching out, whether it's webinars or conferences or formal education. And then we need to couple that with engagement. Be a part of your organization. Volunteer for special projects. Work with your peers. That work ethic piece and that being part of the energy, part of the solution really moves a career forward.
Absolutely. And I like how you gave, cost items and also cost neutral items, because in this day and age, so many people are cutting back their budgets. There may not be funding for professional development.
Absolutely. And there's a wide, diverse array of online resources to grow. And they can be peer-based, they can be mentoring-based, they can be internal and external. Networking is a really key piece of it as well. So all of those together with a center stone, a centerpiece of passion really will drive a career. Those are the big success features.
As a manager, if you have employees who are not passionate about the job, what can a manager do?
Well, generally that means recruitment selection went wrong at the beginning. So we can offset that tremendously at the outset by being sure that when we're recruiting, we're attracting the right people because they like our product, they like our strategy. Right. That selection piece, we got to be sure that they can do this job and they're passionate about it. But then there's, we continue down that HR road and we have onboarding. Well, we need to bring them on and explain why we do things and how we do things and where they fit. And that ongoing relationship of growing them, that development piece, tying into performance management. So we need to be sure that we have meaningful performance management, not just an exercise. And when we have performance management, it needs to be tied to something. And it doesn't have to be financially lucrative. It could be an additional task, or it could be a promotion, or a workplace dynamic. So all of those together really contribute to growing that best employee. It's a continuous, ongoing commitment.
You talked about meaningful performance management. Can you just give us a quick synopsis of what that is to you?
Well, I think we need to be sure that it's anchored to the job. So we need to be measuring what the person's really doing, and ideally anchored to a job description, and then we need to have some kind of formal process in play. So we have an equitable relationship with that assessment and that employee. We need to be sure that we have good data. So let's really know what that employee is doing. Keep a catalog of successes over the year. Keep a catalog of areas of improvement over the year. So when we talk, we have some substantive evidence-based discussions that we can hold. And this needs to be an ongoing dialogue. We don't sit down once a year, chat for 30 minutes, and we're done. We have to have that rapport through the year to grow and improve.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer that feedback is a gift, and a gift that needs to be shared often. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I think when you see positive workplace events, accolade, talk about it. Great job, and this is why. I think that's important. It just reaffirms that person for what they're doing, but it also makes them feel that they're a productive, contributing, meaningful member of that organizational community. But it also is a good role model for the other employees. Okay, this is what's expected. This is behavior that is appreciated. I think it also too helps nurture that relationship between the employee and their leader, or the employee and the organization, which we know then drives commitment, drives retention, productivity. There's all kinds of payback for all stakeholders.
Absolutely. And that positive reinforcement is so much more effective than correction.
It is. And I think conversely, though, to your point, I think when negative events happen, we want to be sure we manage a trend, not an isolated incident, because everyone's going to have an off day, an off moment. And we have to position that within the context of that person's successes as well. But I think when a trend is emerging, we need to manage it. Don't ignore it, it will escalate. Don't ignore it, it could then become accepted practice, then become part of the culture, even more complex. But I think when there are issues that arise that are negative, we need to stop and talk about it. This is what's happening, this is what should be happening, what are you thinking is going on? How about we look at this manner of effective behavior, and let's chat again. We need to have this follow-up mechanism. Without getting to the legalese, document. We really do have to document these discussions and these activities.
Absolutely. And even just from the employee's perspective, maybe they don't even know what they're doing isn't quite in line with what your expectations are. But having that conversation early puts people on the right track, And it takes a lot less to correct at that point than it does later on.
Absolutely. Like HR is this continuous thread, like from the moment we plan to we hire to we onboard, that compensation is tied to performance. It's all this one seamless piece. And if each piece is effectively and respectfully executed, we're going to have this really healthy relationship with our employees.
And that's really what it's all about, is having that healthy workplace. What can you do to create culture in your organization?
Oh, it's complex. It's complex for a new organization. It's even more complex for a long-standing organization. When we think about culture, as I say to my students, it's that ooey gooey stuff. We can have great strategy and great policy, but it's that people piece that's complex. So leaders really bear the onus of organizational culture. Yes, there's a policy piece, and yes, there's a strategy piece at the higher level. Example. Reinforce what's good. They need to have ceremonial pieces, and they need to have rewards and accolades for successes, and then that becomes part of how we do things, who we are.
Right.
Really powerful in organizational culture are peers. You know what's cool to do. At the college, for example, students are the center.
Right.
So it's really part of our culture that we're there to advise, we're there to teach, we're there to consult with them. That then becomes part of the culture. So it's more than what we do, it's also how we do it.
Absolutely. And it's what behaviors are demonstrated in the workplace.
It is, absolutely. And it's difficult to build, and it's important to sustain a healthy culture, and corrective measures take a long cycle. This is not something we can say this quarter, we're going to revise our culture. This is a long-standing commitment. And leaders have to always have it on their radar. They really do set this. They walk it, they talk it, they build it, they continually refine it. They can have change agents, and they can bring forward refinements with colleagues and peers. But at the end of the day, if the manager's ethical, arriving on time, doing their job effectively, being respectful of their peers, the employer's going to, okay, that's how we do things here. That's right. And that really does contribute effectively to culture.
Building on that, what's your advice for those small companies? Maybe right now they're 5, 6, 7 people, but they're really close, or they just have gotten some more funding to grow. That's where workplace culture really becomes a concern, because it's fairly easy to contain in the small groups. Much harder as you get bigger. I
think the theories and the best practices that we see for the large organizations apply to the small organizations. It's just about scalability.
Right.
So we're not going to have an HR expert in-house, but we may be able to bring someone through contract.
Right.
Or we may be able to find someone through a network, for example. But we still have to do those same best practices. And then once we start having effective leadership, even if it's just 1 and 2 and 3 people that are part of that organizational team, leadership matters. Best practices matter. That ethical, respectful piece is still very important. And that goes that entire cradle to grave cycle, from how we recruit right through to how we manage performance.
And I think that's a step that a lot of small organizations forget, that they just think they have a great culture and they take it for granted. And it really is time to maybe document, what is it about your culture that's so great?
It is, and it's hard. If you think of organizations, and usually their founder or their president, they may have tremendous expertise in technology or the restaurant industry.
Right.
But that doesn't make them an HR expert. That doesn't make them a managerial expert. So it's a lot of bandwidth to go, you know what, this is the exact product line we're going to be endeavoring, and this is how I'm going to build the culture to get there. Probably good to lean on someone else, regardless of size, so we can do this right from the set. It's easier to build it and continue it than to rebuild a culture and rebuild practices.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be back with more on Working in the Capital with Carol Ann Samhaber. Call us with your questions, 613-728-1001. Welcome back to Working in the Capital. You can call us with your questions at 613-728-1001. I'm still here with Carol-Ann Samhaber of Algonquin College. Before the break, we were talking a lot about organizational culture and what organizations can do to attract great talent to their organization.
Exactly.
What about keeping that talent that they already have? What can they do to retain it?
It's a burgeoning issue, isn't it? It's a tremendous issue. A, because we see a decreasing population in Canada. We also see a skills shortage in Canada.
Right.
So a lot of what we see in the U.S. media doesn't exactly replicate itself in Canada. So retaining talent is a paramount issue for organizations. Knowing that a lot of employees are going to want to migrate for additional challenges, additional opportunities. So let's try to bring those home. So I think if we talk to employees who leave, they say, well, there wasn't a sense of strategy. Where were we going together? So the first thing organizational leaders need to do is have a good, sound strategy and share that with the employees. Where this is where we're going and why. And that needs to be continually revised and communicated. I think second, employees will leave because they don't see reasonable policy. It's arbitrary, it's absent, so have good policies that are reasonable, that are practical, that are workable. But once that employee is engaged, once they've been effectively recruited like we talked about before, and the onboardings happen so they understand where they fit in this organizational pie, they need to be engaged. So that work needs to be meaningful to them. And that means we need to understand what drives our employees, and different employees have different drivers.
Absolutely.
So one employee may want, ongoing change and challenge, then we need to best service that to keep them. And that employee who wants that calm, quiet moment, if that fits with your strategy and fits with your culture, then allow them that opportunity. I think financial drivers are important for new graduates, so we know that when people are launching their careers, it is about cash. But we know as careers advance, it becomes about meaningful work, important work, wholeness of work. So offer those opportunities to keep your employees. I think retention is going to become an important issue also because we're seeing it so expensive to replace an employee. It can be up to double their annual salary to replace an employee. So it's in the organizational interest to keep that person, to reduce costs and achieve our goals. But it's also that employee's perspective because they made this commitment. If we can keep it richer and deeper, we're probably going to be more fortunate to keep them. Again, where we were earlier, meaningful performance evaluations that have productive end. They're not just reports that are shelved. They have some end goal that the employee sees a gain for. Those are really the important pieces. You need to know your employees.
Well, and I think the other piece sometimes that organizations forget is if you are a smaller organization and people are leaving to get that leadership experience, keep the door open. Encourage them to say, I'm glad you're going to go get that experience. Please come back to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we know you fit.
I think, if we've done an effective job in the recruitment selection piece, once they're in-house, part of the organization's responsibility is to grow that talent.
Right.
Grow it within your own spectrum, what you can offer that employee. But if you've got an employee in a small organization who's just so driven to lead, give them that opportunity. Do some of that offloading to that employee. And conversely, if you've got that employee who just loves that routine of that job, then be respectful of that. We also know that last piece for retention really is leadership. So many employees will tell us they leave because the leadership was ineffective. So at the end of the day, the leaders have to be respectful and talented individuals themselves.
Absolutely. We actually have a question via email.
Okay.
Wow. I've been at my company for 8 years and the culture has always been relaxed. We have a new manager who is focused on a command and control style and spends most of his time micromanaging employees, including myself. I am seriously consider leaving if it keeps up this way. I've tried to tell him I don't need full-time supervision, but it doesn't seem he's been successful. Any suggestions on how I can get my point across? From William.
Oh, well, thank you, William. It's certainly a common issue when leadership changes and the organization perhaps is still in that same moment. So the first thing we want to ask ourselves is, is this new leadership echoing the new organizational strategy and policy? If that's it, then maybe we need to look at where we sit in this organization. More often than not, though, the leadership style has changed and it's no longer aligned with the strategy or the culture. In that case, the first point of contact would be, let's be sure of this manager's style. Let's get to know them, give them that opportunity to really identify their style, really be sure of what we're witnessing. If we're certain that this really is a command and control situation, we need to have a discussion. We need to talk. I understand your style. We each have our own individual piece in this, but perhaps we could look at a different relationship and bring forward solutions. Also, key to changing this relationship dynamic will be proving versatility, proving skills. So demonstrate to this person on an ongoing basis, you can do your job and more. That then will probably allow this person the comfort to pull back, and that may move them out of that command piece. If we look at the literature, command and control generally is an older style of management, and if we see it in current modalities, it generally has to do with a less comfortable manager, a less seasoned manager.
Absolutely.
So demonstrating your competencies while allowing them to grow usually is a viable solution. Not always, but usually.
I agree. And I think oftentimes we see managers with that style who they're so concerned about the 5 to 10% of employees who may not be there to do the very best they can.
Exactly.
And really encourage them, instead of managing for the 5%, manage for the 95% who are.
Absolutely. It comes back to the same point. If we've hired well and we've done this really good job of onboarding, this person's going to want to do their job.
Exactly.
They're going to excel. They're going to naturally flourish. They won't need that person hovering because they're going their own way.
Absolutely. We actually have a caller now. Melanie, are you on the line?
Yes, hi, good evening.
Hi, Melanie.
Yeah, I have a question just surrounding, you were speaking a little earlier on feedback, and I manage a team, and they're a diverse team, so quite a range of individuals, and I'm just wondering if you can recommend a way that I can provide